Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Eric. Thank you for coming. How you guys doing today?
Uh, it could be better. Well,
He could be better, but he's
it
here,
could be.
and
Huh?
that's okay.
Uh,
Eric, how you doing? If you're talking, we
Eric?
can't hear you. Mic check on Eric.
I can't hear him,
Neither can I.
and I'm echoing. I'm echoing through you, JG, and can't hear Eric.
Okay, echo should be solved. We're good with that.
Yep, that's good.
All right,
Here's-
Eric. You want to try to go out and come back in, Eric? You're having problems hearing you.
Yeah, I don't know. Not is he talking in private chat? Nope.
No. Eric, either go out and come back in, send us a message in private chat. Can't hear you if you're trying to talk.
So we're not live yet, are we?
We
Oh,
are
wait.
live.
Oh no. You.
Oopsie.
Anyway, I'm not sure how I'm feeling today. I may have to bail.
Okay.
For a minute.
So
I don't know, Eric. It's kind of choppy, brother.
Tin can.
You want coffee?
Yeah, you're echoey and really not very good audio at all.
Pop out and come back in, okay, Eric?
Want coffee? About 1:30. 1:45.
What's that?
No,
1:30? I'm not. Okay.
Eric, I'm going to remove you and,
Hey,
oh,
There you
good
are.
now.
hey, I'm sorry. I just had to step away for a minute.
All right.
Is that?
Well, welcome. And Mike's not feeling his best, but he's still come to talk.
Yep.
And you guys good with just having a general conversation about evolution, open discussion?
Sure, I'm good with
Yep.
that.
All right. Yeah, I'll just let you guys talk about evolution. I'll throw up the banner on the bottom. If it gets too rowdy or interrupting each other too much, I'll just put it into, 2-minute speaking segments to make it easier on everybody. But other than that, you guys can just get started. Thanks again.
That's cool. Before we even start, I'd like to go ahead and give you a given on this, Mike. I agree that we do see some things like regarding microevolution. I'll give you that. We do see some adaptation, and that's obvious. But what I'd like to do is discuss why you believe in macroevolution. You take that to the macro and what evidences you might have for that. But I'll just shut up and let you talk a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you, by the
Okay.
way, for meeting me here today.
So you're welcome. My voice is a little gravelly, and I'm not. I don't know. I've been exposed to COVID, and I think I'm like psychosomatically, I've already got it. So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure how I feel exactly. I just got up from a nap. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully my voice holds up. So I'm granting you an ocean full of prokaryotes and archaea created by God 4.1 billion years ago. That's where that would be my grant, or where I start from about why I believe in evolution. And but the first thing now I've listened to you talk to some other people about evolution. I spotted a few things, and everywhere that you talked about it, you kept using the word prove, saying that we have to use the evidence to prove evolution. So I want to talk to you about the scientific method a little bit. So where in the scientific method does it say that evidence proves things?
Well, we have what's called falsification. And
Right.
what falsification is?
Disproves.
Pardon me. Falsification is a series of stringent tests that your hypothesis has to go through in an actual attempt to prove it wrong. Now,
right.
For instance, you claim to you would, I'm assuming you would claim, I've heard other evolutionists make this claim, so I'm just going to ask you, would you also claim that when I've asked people about transitional fossils, I often get the answer, every fossil is transitional. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Every form of life is transitional. All the life we have today is transitional. So now,
it seems to me like you're presupposing this.
No.
So, yeah. Okay. So then let's look at your evidence for transitional fossils.
Okay. You said that, like the, what are they? The finches on the Galapagos or whatever, they've watched them over the last decades, and they've seen what you call microevolution or adaptation.
Right.
Okay, so any one of those finches is obviously transitional to another generation of finches, right? You would agree with
there again, you're talking about microevolution. We're not talking about micro, we're talking about macro. What I'm asking you is, you claim that all of these fossils are transitional. I'm talking about fossils, Mike, not finches. You claim that all of these fossils are transitional. That's your claim. So I want to know what stringent tests have you put these. Pardon me?
That's not my claim. I claim that all life, any living organism is transitional. That's my claim.
I also asked you concerning the fossil record, if you believe that all fossils are transitional, and you said yes. Now, so I'll ask you again. Do you believe that all fossils are transitional?
Okay, now listen carefully to my answer. All life forms, every living organism is transitional. A fossil represents an animal that used to be alive. So yes, the fossils would be transitional too, like any other life.
Okay, now let's use Archaeopteryx for an example, a specific example. You have Archaeopteryx, and Archaeopteryx is said to have descended from theropod dinosaurs and been the forefathers or the cousin of modern birds. Is that true?
I think that's the current hypothesis, yeah.
Okay, and what observation is this based on?
I'm not much of a fossil guy. Archaeopteryx. Let's see. Let's take a look at them. That's based on the morphology of Archaeopteryx. It is the hypothesis. Okay, the hypothesis is that they have basically some traits of theropod dinosaurs and some traits of birds, modern birds today. So we believe that they are a link in between, right? That's the hypothesis.
Right.
So we have to disprove that some way, right? We have to find a way to disprove that.
Right. But let's make a differentiation between the observation and the hypothesis. Your observation is the morphology, correct?
Morphology, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you dig the Archaeopteryx out of the rock and you observe the morphology. And you look at that and you observe that it has some of the traits of the theropod dinosaur and some of the traits of the bird, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Now that's well and fine. If you want to do that, Mike, that's fine. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to believe that till the cows come home. But let's look at this honestly. Now you have to falsify that. And there's only one test available that can falsify that. There's only one test that can either verify or falsify your hypothesis. And that's a DNA test. There's no other test will verify that.
Nope.
So
Okay.
do you have the DNA of
No.
the Archaeopteryx or the theropod dinosaur?
No. And there's other ways to falsify the hypothesis.
What other way are you going to test the lineage other than DNA?
If they find other fossils and they find differing morphology and it doesn't fit in with the possibility that it's a transitional species, then we falsify it. Then it's falsified. We know we can't find the DNA because the Earth is a lot older.
So in other words,
right?
your hypothesis becomes untestable. There's no other way to test that lineage.
I just told you how you test it. You test it with the morphology, and you figure out.
Testing the morphology is not testing your hypothesis. The morphology is, that's why we separated the two. The morphology is what you based your hypothesis on. So now you're saying that it's true, it's tested just because you come up with a hypothesis.
Okay, we come up with another fossil with conflicting morphology, right? Something that looks like very similar to the Archaeopteryx, and the morphology doesn't match that it would be a transition species, then the hypothesis is falsified. Okay, that's one way.
How's the hypothesis falsified? Maybe you just found another creature.
Found another creature that didn't fit in, and it looks very much like our new hypothesis is that creature C, we'll call it, was related to Archaeopteryx creature A, okay, and we figure out that creature C does not fit in with the idea that it is going to transition into a bird. So then we falsify the hypothesis. So
that doesn't test your hypothesis at all. Those could be two entirely different creatures.
No, that falsifies the hypothesis.
Of course,
right?
It does. That's not even a test. There's
maybe.
If a woman takes a man to court for child support, is he going to call in 10 other men and compare the morphology to see who is the baby's daddy?
Okay, so you're talking about DNA now? You're trying to make a point about DNA?
Yeah, DNA is the only way in the world you're going to find out if that lineage is true or false. There's no other test in the world.
No, wait.
There's no other test in the world.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Okay, you've already gone off the rails. You said true or false. Okay, we're looking for support for the hypothesis.
No, we're looking for a test for the hypothesis. A way to test it. Your test has to have the capacity to prove it wrong, or in this case, correct. The DNA can prove it correct if it's correct. The DNA will also prove it wrong if it's wrong. So the DNA is the only test you've got available that's going to be able to test whether or not your hypothesis is right or wrong.
That could just be an accident. I mean,
what could be an accident?
The DNA could accidentally be the same exact DNA as somebody else. That doesn't prove it.
So you're going to say that now that DNA tests wouldn't stand up in a court of law, that they don't prove who the father is, who the mother is?
It stands up in a court of law because it provides a great deal of support for the hypothesis. Very, very high, very true support. DNA is like the gold standard, right? So that's a really good thing. But okay, let me ask you, do we have DNA for dinosaurs that are older than 1 million years old?
Well, of course we don't. But that's your problem. That makes it an untestable hypothesis. And now you have to just dig for an excuse why you can't test it.
Okay. So when you have something that happened where you can't reproduce what happened, like in a court of law, okay, or when you're trying to figure out how something happened, you have a hypothesis about how it happened, and then you find evidence that either supports a hypothesis or lessens the support for the hypothesis.
No, that's not a scientific method, Mike.
Okay,
at that point, you have to have a test that has
Let's look at it.
Let me finish just for a second.
It's on the screen. It's on the screen.
Hey guys, you're over talking each other. Let's go ahead, Mike, and finish up with this point.
Okay, read the screen. Do you see the screen? The scientific method, a systematic, logical approach used by scientists and researchers to investigate blah, blah, blah. Observation. Then you come up with a question. Is this a transitional fossil? Research. Okay. Description, conduct, background research. Basically, you come up with some reason to believe or to put your hypothesis together to create a model, right? Then you get your hypothesis. Okay, that's a tentative explanation or prediction. So then we do a bunch of experimentation. We take that fossil, we put it in a CAT scan, we slowly scrape it apart, we create 3D models, we look at current architectures of birds and other theropod dinosaurs and other fossils like it, right? We have all that evidence, right? So we collect all that data.
You mean all of that confirmation bias?
No, it's data.
All of this is untestable stuff, dude. All of it is. You're reiterating the fact that every bit of this is based on morphology. It's based on your observation. Your hypothesis is based on the observation of the morphology. That's all. That's all the evidence you have here. And then from there, the hypothesis that you have suddenly built is that the theropod dinosaurs gave way to the Archaeopteryx. Now, that is fine, that you can do that. But what I'm saying is now you have to test that. And finding other fossils that are also untestable, that's just confirmation bias. That's not running a test. And looking at them again and saying, look at the morphology, they look so much alike in these traits here. Well, maybe they do. But that doesn't mean that your hypothesis that they are related is correct. So what you're basically doing is saying, this is supported by the fact that I made the observation in the first place that there are similarities. So no, that's not evidence. That's your observation and then your hypothesis. And you're doing nothing at all to falsify that hypothesis. You're just piling up other untestable hypotheses around it and calling that evidence. That's called confirmation bias.
Okay. So we have an observation. We found an Archaeopteryx, right? And we do a bunch of research. We do a bunch of checking. We figure out, what theory it fits into. We come up with a hypothesis. Now you're calling a hypothesis confirmation bias. That's what you're calling.
No, that's not what I called confirmation bias.
No, that's what you called it.
I said you have your morphology. Your observation is the morphology. And from the morphology, you go to your hypothesis. You build your hypothesis, which is namely that because of the morphology, you hypothesize that they are related. And so now you have to falsify that. You have to put it through a strict procedure that has the potential of proving it right or wrong. DNA is the only one that can do that. So
okay. Yeah.
It's not the fault of the people around you. It's not science's fault if this is an untestable hypothesis. It's just what you've got to deal with. It's an untestable, just like you can't directly test the Big Bang. Okay, people want me to provide evidence for God, falsifiable evidence for God. Well, you can't directly test God, just like you can't directly test for the Big Bang. And you can't directly test for these alleged transitional fossils. And let me tell you something else. When you can test those alleged transitional fossils, they fail. We have, for instance, the dire wolf for over 100 years. It was stated that the dire wolf is the ancestor to wolves and dogs. But now that we have actually sequenced the DNA and compared it, we know that that's not true.
Okay, so now we've gone on to the dire wolf, but you're wrong about the dire wolf, and you're wrong about what a hypothesis does, and you're wrong about the science.
How am I wrong about the dire wolf?
I'm trying to tell you about. Okay, the dire wolf is the ancestor of modern canines and dogs and wolves, right? It just goes back further than they thought. It's a fox would be more closely related to a wolf than a dire wolf. Okay. but it's still an ancestor. They still consider it an ancestor. So they found out that the DNA is very different than the modern wolf, and they said, "Oh, okay, so we're wrong." So they got some DNA, and they got a better idea.
I'd like to ask the moderator if he would mind sharing it, letting me share a screen for just a moment.
Yeah, you guys can share screens. You okay with that, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sharing a screen, right?
Yeah, if you need to share something on a larger scale, just let me know.
Minus. Oh,
okay. I'm pulling this up. This is from the National Park Service, and I can get you several references here, but this should be good for you. The dire wolf and the gray wolf coexisted for thousands of years. Although dire wolves and gray wolves look very similar, they are not related. Dogs, by the way, are descended from the gray wolf. So no, they're not related to the gray wolf or dogs. Recent genetic testing shows that these two species have separate lineages. There you go. So I'm sorry, but you're wrong, Mike. Now, this brings me to mankind.
Hold on. According to who? Okay, that's one particular piece right there, right?
Okay, I can bring you plenty more.
I'll bring you a couple. Right there. Can you make my screen bigger?
Yeah, hold on.
Let's see. Am I going to have to make mine bigger? I'm going to have to make mine bigger because
I got it for you.
I can't see the damn thing.
I mean,
okay,
yes.
you see dire wolf on the bottom. In the middle diagram, you see dire wolf on the bottom there, where my cursor is. Okay, it's on the bottom. And then up here we have what do we got here? The red wolf. We got the gray wolf. Okay, all of those things come from canina, which means they are related. We simply moved the dire wolf further back on the phylogenetic tree because we got new information.
Yeah.
So when they say they're not related, your source was wrong. He was talking like, okay, I would say I'm not related to you, right? Okay, I'm not
so you're just going to pull up a chart. You're just going to pull up a chart, and you're going to throw us a chart that says they're related with no tests at all.
This is the current hypothesis, which has support.
Yeah, you're showing me a chart with a hypothesis. You're not showing me anything that has any evidence whatsoever. Now, if you want something, if you want another,
pull the DNA. Yeah, do you want to go to the MCVI and pull the DNA and do the comparison? Do we have
pull up something else? I'm going to pull up from Scientific American.
Okay, we'll show that. Hold on.
Okay, there you go. This is from Scientific American from January 13th, 2021. Dire wolves were not really wolves. New genetic clues revealed. The extinct giant canids were a remarkable example of convergent evolution. Dire wolves are iconic beasts. Thousands of these extinct Pleistocene carnivores have been recovered from the tar pits in Los Angeles. It goes on to say, but a new study of dire wolves' genetics has started paleontologists. It found that these animals were not wolves at all, but rather the last of a dog lineage that evolved in North America. So they're like a dog, and they're not wolves. All dogs, like my Chihuahua, for instance, is descended from the gray wolf. But this dire wolf is not. It's kind of a dog, but it's not a wolf, and it's not related to any of the dogs that were ancestored by the wolf.
So what does your article say? What does your article say? The last of a dog lineage that evolved.
Well, you'll have to ask them, but you have to at least admit the truth right here.
You brought it.
A new study of wolf giant. I can't explain everything here, but I can explain that the study of dire wolf genetics has started paleontologists, and they found that these animals are not wolves at all.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
if you look,
evolution.
you can. I challenge you to show me a dog that's not descended from the gray wolf.
I believe they are descended from the gray wolf. So, well, not
there you
exactly.
go.
I think there's some controversy about that. They branched off a little bit before, I think, but anyway, the chart that I showed you is from the Wikipedia, and it's based
That's
on
just a chart, dude. That's a
no, it's
phylogenetic
based,
chart. That's
and
not
it's
tested.
based.
Let Mike answer here, please.
Yes.
That entire chart is based on DNA evidence. The same way that your evidence that you brought that says the dire wolf is further back is based on DNA evidence. So
What
you're
DNA
saying
evidence is that based
you're
on?
saying your DNA evidence to support your hypothesis is correct, but mine isn't. So you bring me a Scientific American article, which is a schlock journal, okay, and you tell me that your evidence is good, or you bring me some park ranger talking about evolution, and that's good, but my stuff here is not good. So why is my stuff? Why are my charts not good here? What do you think?
Well, you have the National Park Service talking about the genetics of the dire wolf, proving that they're not wolves, and you have Scientific American here talking about the genetics of the dire wolf, telling you that they're not wolves, and yet here you are with a chart that anybody can put together for free, untested. You don't. You say that trumps the genetics.
This is from the genetics. Look
how
at
is
it.
that from the genetics if the genetics prove the dire wolf is not a dog
Look at
or
what
a
the chart.
wolf?
Okay, you see the dire wolf down here? Okay, it broke off from this lineage much earlier than they previously. Well, there were a lot of people that thought that dire wolves were not wolves a long time ago, and they were arguing in papers, but nobody listened to them. But they were right. Okay, so all of this, let's see, where's a modern dog? A domestic dog here is more closely related to a red wolf or to
where's the dire wolf again?
The dire wolf is on the bottom. Okay, he broke off from Canina much earlier than they thought, right? And just managed to take on some of the same forms, but he has different teeth.
What did the dire wolf? According to your chart there, Mike, what did the dire wolf then produce? Go on to produce, but wolves and dogs.
It went extinct.
Your chart shows it. Does your chart show it fathering wolves and dogs?
It doesn't show it. No, it doesn't show anything related to the dire wolf. The dire wolf went extinct.
Then why are you claiming that it's related?
Because it's related back here. You see where my cursor is? It's related earlier. The DNA matches a lot more than it would match with a bear or a raccoon.
That's what I'm trying to show you, Mike. You're not reading this chart right. The chart shows that the dire wolf is the ancestor to wolves and dogs. That's what it shows there. That's what it's showing. And
no, it's not. No,
what year did this chart come from?
It doesn't show. It shows it's the latest. It's the latest hypothesis. It's way back here. It's like I think it's what they say 3 million years ago or 2.5 million years.
Move your cursor up about a quarter inch.
Okay.
You moved it up too far. Put it on the word Canada.
Canina.
Okay. Now just raise it up a hair to where that line bears off to the right.
Okay.
Lift it up a little bit.
Right.
Right there. That doesn't that show the dire wolf fathering all the rest of these?
No.
Well, of course it does. Didn't you say that's the dire wolf on the bottom? That's showing you that the dire wolf preceded all of these others.
No,
that's showing you that the dire wolf fathered. Don't you know how to read your own chart, Mike? Come on.
It shows you that the dire wolf came from this line right here that you see, that we don't really know what the example is, right? The DNA tells you
then it shows you where it branches off into the next line.
into
And
all
the
the
next
others.
line and the next line and the next. Yes. That's
Okay,
showing you.
if the dire wolf gave rise to something, there'd be another line out here, basically.
No, the line is up above there
be
showing
another
that line.
lineage.
Well,
Okay.
Mike, I think
We can-
he's pointing out that that line is connected to all the other dogs in the picture, right? It starts
Yes, it
there.
is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And
So there you go.
something, basically, something that gave rise to the dire wolf that went extinct, okay, also gave rise to this other branch right here. And we don't have an example from this. They don't have an example, but they have these side-striped jackal and black back jackal are more similar to the dire wolf, okay? And then these guys are all more similar to each other, and it goes on down. And what we look for is the amount of similarity they have.
Well, if you want to deny that that's showing that dire wolf is related to all of them, that's okay. You can deny it, but that's what it's showing.
No, I'm saying.
And here you have two things though, Mike, from the National Park Service and
now
from
don't
Scientific
put words
American.
in my mouth, okay? You're
Pardon
gonna
me.
piss me off. You're
Well,
gonna piss
we
me
have-
off. I
we have-
didn't
All right,
deny
guys.
that
All
they're
right.
related.
If
Okay,
you guys, can we move away from pulling in? This is my
Sure.
authority. This is my evidence. More into a conceptual area. Can we move from the dire wolves, or do we need to stay here longer?
Oh,
No,
we
we're
can
gonna
move
stay
on
here.
from the dire
We're
wolves.
gonna
I
stay
think
here until we
that the
correct
Watcher
it.
has.
Okay, finish up here, Mike, and we'll see if we can move on. If that's all right.
Okay, we're going to correct something. They are related. You see the lineage? They are related. Here's a wolf.
That's
Here's a dire wolf,
hypothetical.
right? They're related.
That's
Okay,
hypothetical.
I don't care how high. It's all hypothesis. That's what
That's
we
a
call
statement
it.
of faith.
Oh,
That's not
it's
tested science.
hypothesis.
That's a statement of faith, Mike.
It's tested with the DNA.
And the DNA
It's
shows that the dire wolf isn't related to any of them. He
It
didn't
shows
father
that it's
any of them.
related right here.
I
No,
don't
the
care
dire
what you got
wolf
right
didn't
there.
fa-
According
Okay.
to the Scientific American, according to the National Park Service and Scientific American,
Oh
the
boy,
DNA
those are
tests-
authorities.
then DNA tests were run and they proved that there is no connection. So if you want to agree to disagree, we can do that. I will agree to disagree with you. And I can ask you
Well,
then about Homo erectus. Are human beings related to Homo erectus?
Pull your well, we haven't taken care of the first thing we started talking about. Now you moved over to the dire wolf, but now you've created so much misinformation about the dire wolf.
I created no misinformation. I gave you two articles, scientific articles.
Show me in the Scientific American article where it says that the dire wolf is not at all related to modern wolves. Show me that.
I just did.
Show me where they're not.
I just
related.
did. It was from Scientific American and the National Park Service. I just did.
New dire wolf geneticist study. It found that these animals were not wolves at all, but rather, where does it say they're not related?
They're not wolves, period. That's my claim.
They're not wolves, right? Yeah. A coyote is not a wolf, but are they related? A dog is not a wolf. Is a dog a wolf?
Well, I would
Is
say
a dog
yes.
a wolf?
They are the same
Still a wolf.
species.
Still a wolf, but is a dog a fox?
No, they're the same species. Okay,
Dog is a fox.
here's something else that you have.
They're all tennis.
Yeah, guys, I'm gonna
just-
let you move into not closing statements. That's not right. I'm gonna let you move into 2 minutes speaking uninterrupted now. I'll let Eric start. So let's just go 2 minutes at a time. Go ahead and say what you need to say, make a case, and then I'll let the other person respond for 2 minutes. Okay, you can start, Eric.
Okay. Well, really, I would really like to discuss this a little bit more. Not necessarily this, but what I would like to discuss is the human lineage, the alleged human lineage.
Nope.
When we have
Nope.
the statement, I could ask, do you believe that we're descended from Homo erectus?
I don't know. I don't know much about human lineage.
Okay.
What
How
would you say?
about Neanderthal and Denisovan? Why are we not the same species?
We're related to them
Why are we not the same species, though? That's my question.
because our DNA diverges too much and our morphology diverges too much.
How do you know that?
Fossil evidence, DNA evidence for Neanderthals.
Okay. And what does the Neanderthal DNA evidence show us, Mike?
Shows us that we diverged quite a bit from Neanderthals. There's it's showing that it's about, 45 million years ago that we broke off from the lineage that created Neanderthals.
Well, maybe allegedly.
No, this is the DNA evidence that you consider the gold standard.
This is the DNA evidence?
Okay. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. We're not supposed to let you go uninterrupted.
Would you define the word species for me real quick?
I don't think it's a good idea to define species. I think it's a bad word.
So you don't want to define species. Would you agree with me that the definition of species as it relates to biological sexually reproducing animals is a series of like animals that are capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring?
No.
How would you differ with that?
There are also morphological differences, and there is basically differences in the DNA that are significant enough that we can say that it broke off and developed different morphologies, different embryological development that we have.
Okay, Mike, you got 2 minutes, Mike. You can speak uninterrupted. It's kind of a loose format. It's a little bit difficult on this, but go ahead and speak 2 minutes uninterrupted. Then we'll do an open discussion. Okay. Okay.
The way evolution works is we have a hypothesis. Okay. And that hypothesis is our idea about how life on the life that we see today developed from common ancestors going all the way back. And then we developed these phylogenetic trees with the best information we have. We can do a lot of it with DNA, which is interesting. Current DNA will allow us to look way back in the future and figure out when we broke off from one particular lineage or another, even though all you need is 2 different DNAs to compare with each other. Now, you could have DNA from a Neanderthal and you could have modern human DNA, okay? But you don't have the ancient human DNA, but you have 2 of them, right? So you can make that comparison. And DNA evidence is really, really reliable for figuring these lineages out. But evolution has a hypothesis. And what we look for is our hypothesis consists of thousands of different mechanisms having to do with molecular biology and biology. And what we look for when we do experiments, or when we look at fossils, when we look at morphology, when we do modern experiments in breeding and in DNA and in cell biology, we look to support that hypothesis or find something that makes it absolutely impossible. As soon as they find something that makes it look like evolution is impossible, as soon as they falsify it, then I will quit believing it. Until then, it's the best idea I've got to explain how things are happening. Can I prove it? No. You don't prove a hypothesis ever. You support it. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We'll just move into an open discussion. Mike, it's just a small request. Can you put your icon back, or do you need that chart? Just a little more aesthetic. It's no big deal.
Oh, I like that chart. Stop, Cam.
But look, I'll let you guys talk. You guys, it's a good discussion. And if it gets into too many interruptions, I'll cut in. And then at some point, I think we should move into a cross-examination because you guys differ on a lot of ideas, and that'll get interesting. So go ahead.
That's very cool.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I've asked you for the definition of species, and you went into everything but the definition of species, Mike. If I could share this too, bear with me just a second here, JG. I'm going to pull this up to present to everybody. Okay. This is a biological species that we're going to be looking at here. And this is the AI overview from Google. It says, in biology, a species is a group of organisms that can reproduce with each other and produce fertile offspring. Species are the most basic unit of classification in the scientific system of taxonomy. Now, I'd like to make the comment here that this definition is over 300 years old and it predates evolution, and it gives evolutionists quite a fit. As we just showed, Scientific American and National Park Service and other scientific magazines have come out with the evidence that after sequencing the DNA of the direwolf, they are not, in fact, the ancestors to wolves. There you go. As it was declared for over 100 years. But now also we have people declaring that mankind descended from Homo erectus. Well, we don't have a drop of DNA to prove that from Homo erectus, not a drop. And then we have people classifying Neanderthal and Denisovans as completely separate species, but they're not. When we look at what we have actually found out, we've sequenced the DNA of the Neanderthal, we've sequenced the DNA of the Denisovan, and of course, we've sequenced human DNA, and we know for a fact that Denisovans and Neanderthals interbred with Homo sapiens. We interbred with both of them. They interbred with one another, and all of our descendants interbred with one another. This means that we are not, in fact, different species, 3 different species. We are, in fact, the same species, according to this scientific definition. And all of the stuff about DNA and everything that you tried to pull off in there, none of that has a bearing on the definition here of a species. A species is simply like animals that are capable of reproducing fertile offspring. That's all they are. So according to the biological definition of the word species, Homo sapien, Neanderthal, and Denisovan are all the same species. They're not separate.
Okay. You done?
If you'd like to say something, sure.
Yeah. What about the other species concepts?
What other species concepts?
Biological species concept. Let's see.
Well, we're just talking. That is the main definition that we've used for species to define a species for over 300 years. Now, granted, there's what's that? Who said it? Oh, goodness gracious. If you don't know that, brother, you don't know the history of this at all. So it's over 300 years old. Now, the only reason we have competing definitions for the word species today is because this species gives you and other atheists a fit. Because you have so many things misclassified that you're giving an appearance of evolution where there is no evolution. And I think that you're trying to save evolution because you have absolutely zero evidence for macroevolution. None whatsoever. We could also bring into this, if you like, the whale lineage from Pakicetus to the modern whale. Where we start off.
Let's go up onto another topic. No.
Go ahead and respond, Mike.
You've already picked 3. You've already picked 3 topics, right? Okay. The species definition is inadequate because it doesn't cover some very, very different looking bugs that can interbreed. Nevertheless, interbreed, right? Whether or not they, producing viable offspring, I guess would be the key. But there are things that can interbreed that we consider different species. And but all of this is just about how we classify things. It has nothing
like
to do
what?
with
What interbreeds that you would consider it? You might be playing into exactly what I'm talking about, giving the appearance of evolution where there is no evolution because you misclassify things. Like the coyote, for instance. The coyote is not listed as the same species as the gray wolf and the dog. But we know for an absolute fact that the coyote and the wolf and the dog all interbreed together and produce fertile offspring. So your classification of coyote is misplaced also.
What is it? A donkey? I don't know much about horses either. I should know more about donkeys. I came from a farm, but what is the species of a donkey?
Look at number 1, what you're showing right now. Biological species concept. A species is a group of individuals that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring while being reproductively isolated from other such groups. Exactly what I told you. They're like individuals and they can produce offspring.
Right, and then they found the ring species in the lizards in across Western America.
Ring species is similar but different. Ring species means that. What's that?
Why are you interrupting me exactly?
Well, you can go ahead and explain ring species. I'm sorry.
Okay. There's a species of lizard that's distributed across the western United States, and from the north to the south, each of these, the lizards that live close together can usually reproduce with each other typically, but in the northernmost, and this is probably not exact, but the northernmost lizard cannot reproduce with the southernmost lizard. But each of the groups of lizard along the way can reproduce with each other, and that's called a ring species. So that kind of throws a wrench into the species idea, because these lizards look very much alike. They look very much alike.
Well, if they can reproduce, I would say if they are like animals and they're capable of reproducing fertile offspring after interbreeding, according to that definition, they are the same species. Now, what a ring species is, just for the benefit of those that are listening, you were right, but to clear up your definition a little bit, consider you have 4 different animals. Okay, you have like a jackal, or excuse me, not a jackal, a fox, a wolf, a chihuahua, and a Great Dane. Now, just about all of these can interbreed, but the fox, if it interbreeds with these others, it's not going to produce fertile offspring. So though they're like animals, that is, the fox would be considered a ring species. So there you go, because they can all interbreed with one another, but the fox can't interbreed back into with some of the wolves. So there you go. That's a ring species. But all of this is just proving my point. You say that nature will select some things to go extinct, and I agree with that. But you say from there that nature goes on to produce everything from a single-celled organism down Darwin's line of the tree of life of common descent. Now, what's really interesting about this is Craig Venter is the world's foremost geneticist, and he says that the tree of life of common descent is dead. And this is proven through genetics. So a lot of people wonder, well, Eric, you're lying because Craig Venter still believes in evolution. Well, of course he believes in evolution. I believe he's an atheist. But he still comes right out and tells us that genetics prove that there's no such thing as a tree of life of common descent. And he insists that it's a bush or a forest of life, meaning that he believes abiogenesis didn't just occur one time, but it occurred many times in the past. So he's asking, I think, for bigger miracles than the average atheist, because the average atheist can't show us where abiogenesis ever occurred at all, even one time. So the fact that this man, who's an atheist and an evolutionist, comes right out and tells Richard Dawkins that there is no tree of life of common descent, it's dead, that should give you some pause. But apparently I don't think it does. So I've yet to see you address why Homo erectus is said to be our ancestor, when we have no DNA at all to prove it. And I'm interested in why you would believe like Berkeley's 101, Evolution 101, where they say Pakicetus is an early whale. They stated outright, Pakicetus is an early whale. And I think you would agree with that, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Mike, you still with us? You're muted.
Yeah, Mike, you're muted if you're there. Oh, well.
Yeah, I'm here. It takes me a while to get my mouse on the right window. So,
would you agree, Mike, or disagree?
Would I agree to what?
So you weren't listening.
Pakicetus is the descendant of the whale, or whatever.
No, Pakicetus is said to be an ancestor of the whale. The Pakicetus is a dog-sized animal. What's that?
That is the hypothesis, and that really seems to match up well. The evidence supports that well, yes.
What evidence supports that?
DNA evidence, basically.
Oh, the DNA evidence? Okay, I'm glad you said that.
Morphology of the Pakicetus, basically. The DNA evidence between, I think, hippopotamus and the whales supports this. That's how we do it. We have 2 different samples of DNA that we can compare. We don't have Pakicetus. We do have the morphology of Pakicetus, and from that we can extrapolate, we can infer, and we can support the hypothesis.
You said we have what DNA are you saying we have?
We have the modern hippopotamus, and we have the whale.
So you don't have any of the DNA that's going to be necessary to test this hypothesis, do you?
No, it's you
Okay.
could support, you can test it and support the hypothesis with 2 extant species, okay? And we found a fossil. So now we have a candidate, right, that we got to look at the morphology between the 2 extant species and the dead fossil, right? So you look at the morphology and you figure out whether or not the DNA can support the hypothesis. And it does.
Wow. What are you saying now that if we pick 2 living creatures today, give me an example of what you're talking about.
A whale and hippopotamus.
Okay.
We do this all the time. This is where all those trees come from, right?
Okay. So you have the whale and the hippopotamus, right? Now what do?
You take the DNA, you compare the DNA, right? You find that the hippopotamus is the most recent common ancestor, right? And then you look at the morphology.
The hippopotamus is a common ancestor to what? I'm sorry.
Or the one, I misspoke. The hippopotamus is the closest living relative of the whale. Okay, so those 2 things, right?
So what you're saying is that the whale and the hippopotamus have a common ancestor.
Yes, Pakicetus.
And you're saying this is proven through DNA.
No, you don't prove things in science. You support.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. You can't prove that through DNA because you don't have the common ancestor to point to prove that, to test that theory.
Right. Yeah.
So,
if you think
you have another untestable hypothesis.
If you think you know what you're talking about and you keep using the word prove, then you don't.
And you have another untestable hypothesis, Mike.
Okay, we're done.
You're saying.
Can we get that clarified here? Where Mike is contesting that you're using a word that it's not comporting with him in one way or another. Can we clarify this point? See if we can do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then you go back.
Rephrase that.
Does it support the hypothesis?
Does what support what hypothesis?
The evidence of DNA from the modern whale and the morphology of the modern whale, the DNA and the morphology of the modern hippopotamus, and the morphology of the fossil. Does it support or does it
fossil?
Does it falsify? Does it falsify the connection? Does it falsify the hypothesis?
What fossil?
Pakicetus. Have you falsified the hypothesis? Falsify it for me.
You can't falsify that.
Right.
It's unfalsifiable. It's unfalsifiable because you don't have the DNA of the Pakicetus.
No,
Just excuse me, guys. Can we get back to Mike? You said something is kind of getting in the way of the way Eric's coming at you conceptually, and I think it's getting in the way of this conversation. He's using the word proof, and you want to make something clear there, because I think that's becoming a problem here.
Yeah, you have to use the word support the hypothesis or you falsify it, right? In order to falsify the connection between Pakicetus or the whale and some common ancestor that, that Pakicetus and the hippopotamus had, right? Or I mean that the whale and the hippopotamus had, you would have to find something about the DNA where like a big chunk of the DNA was closer to some other animal that was way out there that had nothing to do with it, that looked different, maybe a bird or whatever, that would falsify it right away. So DNA evidence from extant species can falsify common ancestry.
In other words, you're saying that you can look at the DNA of the hippopotamus, the DNA, you observe the DNA of the hippo, you observe the DNA of the modern whale, and you notice some sort of a similarity. And so your hypothesis becomes that they are related through a common ancestor. But now you've got to test that hypothesis. And again, you can't test that hypothesis because you don't have the DNA of the Pakicetus to prove that it is, in fact, a common ancestor.
You can test the hypothesis in a number of ways, right? We can look at...
No, you can't. Not falsifying it. The only possible test that can falsify that to prove it is correct or incorrect. And in this case, it can prove both. The only test available is DNA. You have no other test that can do that. And as for your assertion that DNA or science doesn't prove anything, did we at one time postulate and hypothesize that we could land a man on the moon?
Yeah.
And did we do it? Did we prove it right?
Most people think we did. Jim Bob doesn't.
Okay. Did we at one time hypothesize that maybe we could put unmanned missions on Mars?
Yes.
Did we prove that one correct?
I wouldn't say prove it. We have a lot of support for that idea.
We haven't actually gone on to send unmanned missions to Mars.
Have you been?
Yes,
to Mars?
I would say that it certainly is proven, unless you're going to say that this is all a lie and you're a flat earther or something.
Have you been to Mars? Did you see?
No, but I will certainly take their word for it, especially Elon's and NASA,
Right.
and they all say that we are. You accusing them of lying?
We agree on that. I'll take their word for it too, because there's a lot of
okay. So
evidence.
then science. So then you agree with me?
Eric, try to let Mike finish.
Yes, I'm sorry.
We're talking a bit. All right.
Yeah. I apologize, Mike. But yes, so you're agreeing with me though, in effect, that science does prove things.
No.
Okay. Well, then let me ask you this. Do we hypothesize that there are certain combinations of medicines that we can give somebody that will regulate their heart and their blood pressure?
You're just generating sound now. Okay.
What?
You know that I'm going to agree with all this, but I'm not going to say.
Okay, so you're agreeing with me that science proves things. Now, you just don't want to say it, but that's okay. Everybody here sees that. That's good enough for me.
Science doesn't prove things. It supports a hypothesis.
Science proves things right or wrong every single day. It can't always prove everything. I agree with that. But it does certainly prove things right or wrong every single day. And it could certainly prove your hypotheses are right or wrong. As in the case of the dire wolf, it proved it wrong.
Okay, let's let Mike respond uninterrupted.
Sure.
Where should we even start with this? The only thing that proof works for, okay, and this is the language that I speak, okay, being a scientist and having a lot of years in this field. Basically, the only thing that is proven is mathematical theorems. We prove those. For science, we don't prove anything. We support the hypothesis. Okay, NASA landing a rover on Mars, okay, is a hypothesis that has so much support that we may colloquially use the word prove, right? I mean, that's fair. One would say, oh, yeah, we've proven that, right? I mean, I've proven that if you mix sodium hydroxide and hydrochloric acid, that it creates salt, right? I mean, we could say we proved that, but that's not really the way you talk in science. And if you're going to understand evolution, you're going to have to quit using that word prove. Otherwise, you're going to completely miss the point.
Well, while I can appreciate what you're saying, I can be bolder than you because I'm no atheist, and I can look at this. I can look at this evidence and I can say, well, this is proven here, and this is not proven here. And I can use the word proof because I'm not afraid of science. I can look at the things that science does prove every single day. And I can look at the things that science can't prove. For instance, science can't prove a Big Bang because you can't directly test it. Of course.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna move you guys into the 3-minute cross-examine. So we'll let Eric start since he's done this before. Mike, if you want to put your cursor back on the screen, because we're not going to bring in any articles at this point. So the rules are on the bottom. Basically, the person speaking or asking questions has control of the floor. So if Eric is interrupting you or calling for a redirect or next question, you're supposed to follow his lead. So prepare to be interrupted if that's his will, and then you'll have the same opportunity. And it'll be in 3-minute segments, and you'll have the opportunity to do the last one.
This almost feels like a formal debate, and I didn't agree to that. But
well, no, I mean, it's the cross-examine is essentially a debate. So it's a segment of debate. If you decline it, that's fair enough. You didn't agree to that, but if you'd like to try it, we can do that too. It's your call.
Yeah, we haven't basically. I mean, for all the things that have been brought up, we haven't fully explored any one of them. Okay, like he brought up this Venter thing. Will you let me speak for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, he brought up this Venter thing, and it's simply not what Venter said. He misrepresented him, okay, entirely. And we'd cover that. And the dire wolf thing not being related, he brought up a couple articles that didn't say anywhere in the article that they weren't related, so he was wrong about that. We can't agree on proving science. He believes that, I mean, you guys probably think it's proven that Jesus rose from the dead, right? I don't. I think it's a hypothesis with no support, okay? And so we've got all of these loose ends, right? And now we're going to allow him to gish gallop some more and bring up some more stuff in 3-minute segments, and I'm supposed to respond to it, and I don't think I want to play that game. So.
Okay, well, I see what you're saying. The cross-examination round also serves to clarify some things as well, so you could see it both ways. Let me put it this way: Would you prefer to keep it an open discussion, or to go into 2 minutes speaking uninterrupted? You can yield your time if it's less than 2 minutes. I'll let you choose.
We're walking over each other, but if he wants to spend 3 minutes just talking about one subject, one thing that we can dive into, then I can go back and support that. But I mean, if we want to gallop across all of the usual creationist talking points, then I just think we should end it. I'm not willing to gallop. But if you can limit yourself, Eric, just one thought.
Hey, if you don't mind, I would like to answer. I mean, you made a couple charges there that I thought were extremely unfair, like telling me that I didn't understand what Craig Venter said and that I've got his quote wrong. If I could, I'd like to present just a very short clip of Mr. Venter himself making this statement, where he says that the tree of life is an artifact of science that didn't work out. And Richard Dawkins is perplexed by this. And Venter laughs at him. And Venter is a very important person here. Whereas Dawkins is a biologist, Venter is the man that figured out the human genome before teams of government and corporate scientists could. And he's the one that also took the DNA out of a living E. coli bacteria cell and created his own DNA to put inside it, and it actually worked. So I'd like to share this little clip here of Mr. Venter telling these people that the tree of life of common descent is an artifact of science that didn't work out. Can you see this, guys?
Yeah, we got it up there.
Okay.
Well, how long is it? 3 minutes?
It's very under 3 minutes. Yeah.
Work, what the minimum, do we yet know what the minimal configuration is to make life?
You mean the minimal gene set?
The minimal gene set.
We're whittling down on it, but there won't be a minimal gene set. There'll be multiple ones, because I'm not so sanguine as some of my colleagues here that there's only one life form on this planet. We have a lot of different types of metabolism, different organisms. I wouldn't call you the same life form as the one we have that lives in pH 12 base that would dissolve your skin if we dropped you in it.
Oh, I've got the same genetic code. We'll have a common ancestor.
Well, you don't have the same genetic code. In fact, the mycoplasmas use a different genetic code and
Little
would
bit.
not work in your cells. So there are a lot of variations on the theme.
But you're not saying it belongs to a different tree of life from me, are you?
Well, I think the tree of life is an artifact of some early scientific studies that aren't really holding up. So the tree, there may be a bush of life.
Right. Yes.
Bush.
I don't like that word.
But that's only in.
All right, I concede that. Yeah.
So there is not a tree of life. And in fact, from our deep sequencing of organisms in the ocean, out of now we have about 60 million different unique gene sets. We found 12 that look like a very, very deep branching, perhaps fourth domain of life. That obviously is extremely rare, that it only shows up out of those few sequences. But it's still DNA based. But the diversity we have in the DNA world, I'm not so sanguine and ready to throw out the DNA world. I think we're going to, maybe like Richard was saying, we're going to find the same molecules and the same base systems wherever we look.
You, in fact, had a comment you wanted to make, Richard. I think.
Well, it's rather moved on. I mean, I was just going to say, I can't imagine why anyone should think it was an ethical problem. I could see why they might think it was a problem of expediency. You might fear that it would, escape and overrun the world or something. But ethical problem, I can't see.
Well,
but I'm now intrigued by Craig saying that he.
What the hell?
Active shooter alert.
I'm intrigued at Craig saying that the tree of life is a fiction. I mean, the DNA code of all creatures that have ever been looked at is all but identical, and surely that means that they're all related, doesn't it?
There you go, guys. There you go. So there you have Craig Venter telling everybody that the tree of life of common descent is an artifact of science that hasn't held up. So you can see, Mike, I didn't lie about that. I didn't misunderstand him at all.
Yeah, let's give Mike some time.
Okay. So what Venter is talking about, and I agree with Venter, not everybody does. I don't think Dawkins does. I don't know why. But it is a bush of life. And what Venter said, okay, let's see, ChatGPT says that while Venter did not say that the tree of life didn't exist or whatever, what he did say, or what he did suggest, is that when it comes to this ocean full of prokaryotes and archaea that gave rise to the eukaryotes and gave rise to some of the populations that ended up being all the species we have today, that there was no tree of life back there, that if you trace it back enough, okay, it's going to be a bush. And the other problem is that if you consider the tree of life to be like that there was just one ancestor, right, that gave rise, like one cell, one unique particular cell that gave rise to all the life today, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. So I agree with Venter, right? But what he's talking now, he wasn't casting doubt on the tree of life going forward from about 700 million years ago, or even probably a billion years until current time. What he was trying to make a point about, because he's a physiologist, and that's his focus, is DNA and physiology and whatever. He's trying to make the point that it was a lot messier than we thought it was when it comes to that ocean full of single-celled organisms, and that's how you misrepresented him. You said that you implied that he was saying that looking at that canid tree of life that I showed you, that there was something wrong with that. No. If you ask Venter point blank, if he thought there was anything wrong with that,
That's not what I said.
He would tell you no. You said what?
Yes.
Said that your one man shot down the entire tree of life thing.
No.
And said, well, then he doesn't work. That's what you said.
I don't believe you've understood a single word I've said today, to be honest with you, Mike, because you're misrepresenting it. You know, Craig Venter said what he said, and you've got to deal with that. I know that he's still an evolutionist. I know that he's still an atheist. And I know that he believes that abiogenesis occurred more than once. So, you know, the fact that you agree with him there, that now that you know what he actually did say and believes, sure, you can put your position there, and that's still just fine. But you still are in the same position that you began with. You don't have any way at all to test for a common ancestor for anything. You can pile up all of these hypotheses and lay them on top of each other and call them all evidence for another hypothesis. But that's still just confirmation bias of one untestable hypothesis after another. And you're saying that because you can pile up untestable hypotheses, it proves one of them right. And I think that that's just a ridiculous statement, a ridiculous way to go about this. I think, Mike, that you should be straight up and just say, look, yes, if when we do have a hypothesis, we're supposed to give it the most stringent test possible to prove it right or wrong. And if we can't, then it's not falsifiable. And that's just something that we have to deal with. It's just a cool story, dude. And that's all it is.
Okay. So the hypothesis is what you're calling bias for some reason. Okay. Because we obviously
no.
Okay, you're interrupting me. I think you're interrupting me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but go right ahead. But I'm not calling a hypothesis biased.
Okay, so
I did call something confirmation bias. And do you know what confirmation bias is, Mike?
Oh my God!
That means that you don't really have proof for something, but you pull in 10,000 other things and say, this is proof, this is proof, this is proof, this is proof, when none of it really is. That's confirmation bias. You're pulling in, you have a hypothesis, like, for instance, Pakicetus is related to the whale. Okay, now you need to test that, but since you can't test it, you're pulling up all this other stuff and saying, well, it looks so much, and when you say it looks alike, I find that so strange. I want to show everybody something here, if you don't mind, real quick. I'll share this.
Well, we're gonna let Mike respond here, and you can show that next.
Okay, that's cool.
Got something he's laying out here on the screen.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when it comes to evolution, okay, we have a hypothesis, or basically how it happened. So our question is, how did it happen? And then we go through this process where we say, oh, well, we think it happened through some biological mechanism. We don't know what, right? So we have a guess. Well, then we got a ton of work here to do, which is all the biology, basically. All the biology is how this thing could happen, right? The model. So now we know that our guess, our hypothesis is plausible, that it could have happened this way. And then we refine that, and we do a whole lot of work here and come up with a mechanism, right? Which is what most of the DNA work does. Then we do an experiment, which is to look at extant DNA and any DNA we can find historically, and to look at morphology and to look at embryology and all of the other science. And that's a huge field of science, right? The experiments. And then number 5.
Could you explain the embryology, please?
You interrupted me.
I'm
Number
sorry.
5, we find out whether it supports or falsifies our hypothesis. Okay. If it falsifies our hypothesis, we throw evolution out, right? It's just gone, bang, gone. Okay. So far, all we found is support. So every one of these things, like some parts of our model were falsified. Some parts of our model were not supported. And then the model was refined. So there's a refinement process that goes on with the hypothesis, but not the overall hypothesis. The refinement happens in the mechanism, right? And this is science. It just keeps moving forward. We'll find out, oh my God, the dire wolf was not the ancestor or basically gave rise to modern wolf. Somebody had a hypothesis it did. They were wrong. It was falsified by the DNA evidence, right? So
Right.
we keep going through this. But all we
Mike,
have is support.
If I may, I don't think Eric is disputing your process here. I think he's pointing out that when you say things get thrown out that are falsifiable, he's actually questioning the intricacies of the process and the particulars. How would you know the bias of what's discarded and what's not, and so forth? Go ahead.
And not only that, but I'm also interested in he brings up certain things and throws them in there and doesn't go into any explanation at all, like embryology. You said embryology is an evidence of this. Go ahead and explain that, please, Mike.
Okay. So when you were a zygote, you split, right? The cells split. They're 2 different cells. Okay. And then it's split again, right? Okay. Now cells have the property that they allow things to get out of the cell and they allow other things into the cell. And these are called paracrine, autocrine, endocrine, and juxtacrine, basically transfer of information between one cell and the other cell, right? Okay. So what we look at in evolution is that if we have say we have a long, small intestine, right, coming out of a stomach, okay, and then we have some basically blood vessels, going along that. And then we find in some extant animal today, we find that some of these blood vessels have been diverted into like a little area of tissue, right? And we look at that embryologically. And what happens is as these cells keep splitting, okay, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, on and on, right? Very quickly. Okay, that happens over the first few days. These things tend to differentiate, right? So now this part of the organism is going to become a different thing. Eventually, there's going to be a part of the organism that starts to grow a limb, grows out 5 fingers and an arm. And we've traced all of that out. We know that intricate mechanism, right? So what we do when we look at an animal like a fish with limbs or a fish with fins, and then we look at a tetrapod with limbs, okay, we have to look at the embryology, and we find that some of the same signals that develop those parts of the fin also develop parts of an arm in another mechanism, except there are some differences, right? Some very small differences that are supported by the possibility of mutating DNA. So we can see one gene changing. Okay, we'll just say, we're not going to complicate it, but I can if you want. But one gene changes so that basically it reaches further into like you have all these clusters of cells, over here. Okay, we have a little branch of liver, right? So a gene basically creates that. Okay, and then
so what I want to ask you is, how does any of this prove a relation with another animal?
every bit of it does. It all supports the evolution hypothesis.
No, how does any of this test your hypothesis and show that they are in fact related or not?
Every little piece of it either supports it or falsifies it. Either we're going to
by support, you're talking about what I just called confirmation bias. That's what you're talking about. Because now all you're doing is presenting another hypothesis that because you have these similarities in embryology, you're saying this proves a relationship. But now what you've got to do, you still got to go back and find that common ancestor that allowed this. You've got the very same problem that you began with. Okay. And the problem is you can't test that common ancestor. So this is not further evidence. This is confirmation bias. This is one more untestable hypothesis that you're throwing in with the bunch.
Okay, that's a really cool layman's opinion of science that is so misinformed that it horrifies me.
Well, you can call it misinformed, but let me show everybody a little something here. I will share this with everybody if you don't mind. This is going back to the Pakicetus and the whale. I wanted everybody to see what this evidence is based on. Now, if you can see this, of course, you see the hippopotamus up top. They're saying that it is related to the modern hippopotamus.
Are you able to control plus and enlarge that?
Let me try. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you got the hippopotamus up top here. You got the modern whale down below here. Now, I want you to notice the skulls. Notice the skulls. Because what happened was, 100 or so years ago when they're trying to figure out the evolution of the whale, they go back to this Pakicetus, and you notice the shape of the skull right there. And what it is, there's a little thick spot right here by the eyes. There's a thick spot by the eyes that is, well, similar to a thick spot that the modern whale has. Also, they've got like paws, and those paws, if they were fingers, they would be showing fingers, 5 fingers. But they've got the paws of like similar to a dog. And that's about it. That's the similarity that they said, oh gosh, look, there's 5 finger-like bones in its paws, and the modern whale has 5 finger-like bones in its flipper. And my goodness, look, there's a thick spot here by the eye of the Pakicetus, and the modern whale has a thick spot by the eye. So this must mean that they're related. And he goes down through the ambulocetus. Oh my gosh. They go down through the ambulocetus, and the ambulocetus, we have nothing, no DNA to prove it's related. Then this one down here, whatever it is, we don't have the DNA to prove it. Then we go on down to the, we don't have the DNA to prove any of these. Now, they do say something up here that I find very interesting. The first thing to notice on this evogram is that hippos are the closest living relatives of whales, but they are not the ancestors of whales. In fact, none of the individual animals in this evogram is a direct ancestor to any other as far as we know. And yet that's how they're displaying it. So, and let me go further and show you the fraud. Look down here when we get into the actual literature that Berkeley gives us. These first whales, such as Pakicetus, were typical land mammals. There's no possibly here. There's no hypothesis here. This is a bold statement, dude, telling us that Pakicetus was the first whale. One of the first whales. That's ridiculous. We don't have the DNA to prove this, and they're basing this on a thick spot in the skull and 5 finger bones in its fins. That's just absolutely ridiculous. You call this science, Mike?
So you don't like the way the guy wrote that. I kind of agree. It almost sounded contradictory, where he said
Well,
one thing and then said another thing later on. But yeah, so that author, I'm not sure. Do you know who he was? Do you have
well,
his
that's
credentials?
that's Berkeley's 101 evolution class, Evolution 101.
So somebody
know?
wrote, but you don't know who wrote
That
it. Right?
that come out of their that's part of their curriculum.
Yeah, that's kind of a colloquial way to talk about things, right? Okay, if they're not direct ancestors, those phylogenetic trees don't show direct ancestors. They show those lines that they show. We don't know what those things are, right? Those are the ancestors. Okay, those are the hypotheticals, right? So that's what we're always trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out, like, it would be really great. It would be really great if we found a real potential candidate for the link between chimpanzees and humans. And I think we found some candidates, but we're, a little shy on proof right now, as far as putting it together. So anyway,
would you agree with me that when they word things this way, Mike, they're being dishonest? When they call the Pakicetus an early whale and they speak it as fact, and rather than presenting it as a untestable hypothesis?
Well, were you being dishonest when you said we've proven that we landed a rover on Mars?
Well, I think we
not
have.
being any more. They're not being any more.
Is that addressing Eric's question?
What's that?
Is that addressing Eric's question? It seemed like you ignored his question and asked him a question.
Yeah. Basically, there's a tremendous amount of support for having landed men on the moon. Okay, tremendous amount of support for it. There's a tremendous amount of support for this whale thing. So when people speak colloquially and they say, "Oh yeah, the Pakicetus was the first whale," I'm sure he misspoke, but colloquially we can kind of say, yeah, something like the Pakicetus back there was the ancestor of the whale.
Okay, you're saying there's massive evidence for it, and I keep saying that it's just confirmation bias.
There's evidence for supporting the hypothesis.
Okay, what is that? I mean, besides the thick spot in the skull by the eye and the 5 fingers in the flippers, finger-like bones, I should say, in the flippers. What is your evidence?
The succession in the fossils, as they lined them up, they saw that the nostrils were going further and further back on the skull.
And there again, you're assuming, aren't you, that they are related in the first place, that one has given rise to the other.
Now you figured it out. Okay, now you know what a hypothesis is. Okay, that is the hypothesis.
Right, with no test to prove any of it.
Okay, but you got to start somewhere, right? I walk into my house, windows broken, shit all over the floor. I have a hypothesis that I've been burglarized. Only a hypothesis. My wife could have went crazy. My cat could have gone crazy. I have a hypothesis that it was a burglar because the window's broken. My money's missing. My TV's missing. That's my hypothesis. I have a bias, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to gather evidence to support that hypothesis or to falsify it. And falsifying it would be, my cat comes running across the floor with a piece of my TV. And I realized it was Snack that did it. Okay. And then I falsified my hypothesis. But if I don't falsify it, I keep supporting it and supporting it and supporting it. At some point, I'm going to walk out and call the police and say, hey, I've been burglarized. And the police are going to say, well, were you there? Can you prove it? Do you have the DNA? Do you have video evidence? No, I don't. I have supporting evidence. Do you understand what a hypothesis is? When you keep saying bias, I keep hearing hypothesis.
Do you know what a confirmation bias is?
Yeah.
I'm not saying any of your hypotheses.
Okay, no, that's different.
Biased.
That's a little bit different. Okay.
Exactly. That's what I'm accusing you of. I'm not accusing you of having a biased hypothesis. I'm saying that what you keep stacking up as evidence is confirmation bias. It's not exactly. It's just one untestable hypothesis after another that you keep throwing up here and calling it evidence. That's confirmation. What's that?
every single one of these hypotheses is tested and has been tested, and all
How?
of the evidence supports the hypothesis, right? Okay,
No.
confirmation.
Not a one of these have been tested, dude. Not a single one.
Every
You
one
can't
of them.
you can't show me the testing that they did for Pakicetus to prove that it's an early whale.
The morphology, what you're reading
The
about
morphology is
this-
your observation that they have that thick spot in the skull and 5 finger bones in the whale and 5 finger bones in the paw. That's all you've got going for you. This
Right.
morphology. And that's what you based your hypothesis on. That's not a
Well,
test.
when it comes to fossils where we don't have the DNA, that's all we got to go on is morphology.
So, in other words, it's an untestable hypothesis. Exactly.
No.
Why?
No.
What don't you understand, Mike? You can't make the observation, then develop your hypothesis and say, well, that's the test. I just proved it.
I can. Okay.
Well, you can, but you look foolish doing so. At least you're admitting it in front of everybody that you're making an observation and you're declaring it's true just because you came up with a hypothesis.
All right,
Therefore, it must be true.
Let's hear from Mike.
You put those words in my mouth, true and prove. Okay, you keep putting those in my mouth. Stop that. Okay, I never said it was true. Okay, I said it's a hypothesis that's supported, that I believe in because it has so much support. Like I believe that men landed on the moon because it has so much support. Okay, so evolution is supported now. How would we test this thing about the nostrils going further and further back on the skull? Okay, we go back to
How do you know that happened, Mike? You're assuming that happened. You're assuming that these animals are related, and that's why it's that appearance. You're not assuming that maybe these are completely different animals, unrelated.
We're assuming the hypothesis, and then we look for evidence to support it. And if we find something that doesn't support it, that falsifies it, then we reject the hypothesis. Okay.
So you're going to go on all this weak evidence and call that well supported.
That's all we got is weak evidence. I don't know if you exist. I don't know if the entire universe was created last Thursday. I have no way to prove that.
You've got more evidence than I exist than you do that the Pakicetus is an early whale.
No, I don't know about that.
Well, I'm sitting here talking.
There's certainly a lot of faith involved in this process, which you don't deny, Mike, correct?
No, I don't. No. There's faith involved in all of humanity, and that's all how we live. That's how our brains work. Sorry. Anyway, so now how would we test it? Okay, finding out how the nostrils went to the back of the skull. Okay, if we look at the embryology of a developing whale and a developing hippopotamus, okay, we're going to find all of these what's called morphogenetic fields. It's a wonderful word that just means that the cells are communicating with each other, and at some point a threshold is reached and a nostril is created, right? And so we look at the genes basically and the transcription involved in these things, and we find that it takes a very, very small tweak, just 1 or 2 mutations, to move that nostril from one part of the nose to the other. Now, can we prove that? Yeah, we can. We can take a developing embryo, we can modify that gene, and lo and behold, the nostril is further back on the head. We could probably create a mutant hippopotamus with nostrils, up above its eyes, right? That sort of thing. And so then we have some confirmation for our hypothesis, right? Now, confirmation bias would be if my cat come running out of the closet with a piece of the TV, and I said, "No, go back in the closet. We don't want to look at that. We don't want to look at that evidence," right? I mean, if we have some other evidence of some other way that whales came to be, if I had another idea about how whales came to be without being related to Pakicetus, oh my goodness, stop it. Okay. Then I would, say, okay, we got to look at both of these things. Now we have 2 competing hypotheses, right? Now we have to compare between the 2. If I were to just pick one and ignore all the evidence for the other, that would be confirmation bias.
Eric, he's kind of laying out a good example of confirmation, but he's kind of laying out a good example of confirmation bias here. But I think what you're contesting is that there is confirmation bias all throughout this that he's overlooking. Would I be correct in stating that?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Everything he's piling up is nothing but confirmation bias, from his embryology to his studying the current DNA of all living life. And I'll explain how really quick. For instance, you look here at this chart that shows that the hippopotamus is related to the modern whale. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, cool story. But what are they going on? They're going on the observation that there are certain specific genetic likenesses in the DNA. And
Right.
that's exactly what they're going on. When they see these likenesses, they're saying that this means these two are related. Now, if they want to go on believing that, brother, I have no problem with that. If they want to go on and say that they believe it with all their heart, I have no problem with that. But the second they go and say this is science, I've got a problem with this, because it's untestable. What they're assuming, and what the hypothesis is assuming and states, is that the hippopotamus and the modern whale have a common ancestor. Cool story, but point to it. Show me that common ancestor, and then test it. Show me the DNA of that common ancestor. You don't have it. So this becomes just another untestable hypothesis that you're throwing in as evidence for your first untestable hypothesis. And that's what they call confirmation bias.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a really good case. So how would we find evidence for this common ancestor? What would we
Exactly.
do?
Exactly. You
What
are
would you
out of
suggest?
luck. You are out of
What would
luck.
you suggest?
You
Okay,
can't
are you
point
sure?
to a common ancestor, so you can't test it.
Okay, what if we find more fossils?
Well, that's more confirmation bias. That's all you're doing, throwing more untestable
Wait a minute,
hypotheses
wait a minute.
in
What
as evidence.
confirmation bias for what? For a hypothesis? You mean support for a hypothesis?
I'm saying it's
You
not
just
support your hypothesis. It's just more confirmation bias. All you're doing is taking another untestable hypothesis and throwing it in there and say this proves it. Well, no, it doesn't.
okay. Let's
It's
look
not
at
even
bias.
supporting evidence. It's not even supporting evidence. All it is confirmation bias. It's just another untestable hypothesis that you're throwing on top of your first untestable hypothesis. And then when you throw embryology in, that's another untestable hypothesis, because then your hypothesis is that this, for instance, the embryo is said to go through all these various stages. Okay, now the embryo does go through all the stages, but that doesn't mean that we descended through all of these stages as a race, as a human being. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that we originated from a single cell organism, all life. No, it doesn't. Craig Venter says that's not even possible because of the genetics. The genetics prove this isn't wrong, right.
You're lying about Venter again. Don't lie
Well,
about Venter.
no, I'm not. He believes in evolution wholeheartedly, 100%. But he does not believe in the tree of life of common descent, which is the idea that all of life originated from a single cell. So that's what it is.
Where does Venter say that the tree of life falls apart? At what point? How long ago?
I just played it for everybody. If you don't remember that and you weren't watching, it's not my fault.
You don't remember yourself?
I said, if you don't remember it, it's not my fault. I just played it for everybody.
I'm really old. I lose things. I have short-term memories going to hell. Tell me, where did he say when the tree of life becomes a bush?
What?
Have you seen the new diagrams? Have you seen the bush diagrams?
He said the tree of life of common descent is a fiction.
He said the whole tree of life, every single piece of it, including Canaan, Canina, and Canaan.
Dude, what he said was, you heard what he said.
What did he
said
say?
The tree of life of common descent is an idea that didn't pan out. Period. Now, if you don't want to believe that and you want to hang on, you're doing, I call that willing ignorance, where a person is willing to bypass the facts and refuse the facts and hold to ignorance so that they don't have to change their position.
Because one person says something, I'm supposed to change my position. One bit of evidence, one person's opinion in a conference where he's speaking colloquially, I'm supposed to take that as a scientific paper?
Well,
Is that what you're telling me? That if
no,
somebody,
but he's got his scientific papers out. Now, you can
Why do
take
I
Richard Dawkins' reaction, because Richard understood exactly what he was saying. And Richard said, I don't understand. Richard Dawkins, he was the one that said, I don't understand why he's saying that the tree of life of common descent is a fiction. That was Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, he's kind of a dipshit.
Yes, he is.
Anyway, let's see. Oh my God, we haven't even established that you're wrong about Venter. We'll just assume you're wrong about Venter.
Well, you can assume that, but I don't think everybody else is going to.
What do you think, guys? You want to table this and continue this? We're going on the 2-hour mark. You can keep going.
No, I want to talk about how Eric is biased. Okay. Now, earlier in the discussion, and I don't want any interruptions, Eric. Okay.
Feel free. Go ahead.
Earlier in the discussion, you said you can go in a court of law and you can prove who your daddy was with DNA evidence. You said prove. You think it's in other words, of course, you can't prove anything, but it's really, really strong evidence, much stronger than us landing a man on the moon. So you would consider it proving, and you would use a colloquial language, prove. Yet when they take the hippopotamus DNA and the whale DNA and they make this comparison, you say, oh, it's bias. You're biased. They aren't.
I didn't say that was biased. I called that confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias, right?
Yeah, you obviously don't understand the meaning of the word, the meaning of the phrase.
I'm
not saying that was a biased hypothesis. I said that it was confirmation bias, and that it is an unproven, untestable hypothesis that you were just throwing in to try to reinforce another untestable hypothesis.
And when I
that
tell you
is what you call, that is what I'm referring to as confirmation bias.
Okay.
Gary Olson.
How would you like to? I'll tell you what. If you would like to, it has been 2 hours.
Yeah, we can.
I could go as long as you like, or I could go ahead and we could call this quits and come back again. I would like to talk to you more on something that we started talking about last time, and that was purpose.
Purpose. Oh, yeah.
Can we schedule another discussion for purpose?
Sure.
Okay.
You mean purpose in human life? Our purpose?
Yeah. What are we for? What are we here for? Do we have purpose?
Yeah. If we talk about evolution again, the only thing we're going to talk about is what a hypothesis is and how it works. That's it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. Would you agree that scientific method is this? You make your observation, you develop your hypothesis, and you end up falsifying it, testing it with a stringent series of tests that have the capability of proving it wrong.
I like to basically look at, hang on a second here. Hold on a second. Okay. Scientific hypothesis. Let's look at it. Okay. Let's look at somebody who knows a lot. That's ChatGPT. It's like the smartest guy I've ever met. Okay. The steps, observation. Okay. Descriptions. You develop a question, right? Okay. The question is, how did life arise, or how do we get this diversity of life? Okay. And then you do research, conduct background research to understand what is already known about the topic. Okay. So you start looking at biology and putting things together. And then from all of that, you come up with a hypothesis. Okay. We know about DNA. We know about embryology. We know about a ton of things today. And our hypothesis is that it descended from this common ancestor, this common population, not one ancestor, but a population, right? And then you do experimentation. Okay, and then data collection and analysis, and you figure out whether or not, okay, you analyze it to determine whether it supports or refutes your hypothesis. Of course, you're going to be biased to your hypothesis. That's what you're trying to support or falsify.
You're still
So,
not
yeah,
understanding the word that
now, if
phrase
you have
confirmation
two,
bias.
if you have two competing confirmation bias is when you have two competing hypotheses and you ignore evidence from one because you favor the other. Okay. For evolution, we don't have two competing hypotheses, right? Well, you think we do, but I don't. There's only one hypothesis I have. And if it gets falsified, then I'm going to start shopping around for something else. But so far, nobody's falsified evolution. So there you go.
Uh,
I'm not biased. I
Well,
wouldn't be reading, Eric, let me tell you something. I wouldn't be reading about evolution and trying to figure out how it all worked. And I wouldn't be reading about embryology and molecular biology if I were biased. If I absolutely said, "Oh,
you
I know,"
still don't understand the phrase confirmation bias, dude. I've tried to explain it to you, I don't know how many times now, and you still don't understand the phrase.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering why you keep misusing it. You keep accusing me of something that isn't true here. I haven't said that anything, that you're biased in anything. I said what you've given me as evidence is confirmation bias. Not that any of these theories or hypotheses in particular are biased, but that what you're giving me and calling evidence is nothing but confirmation bias. When you take one hypothesis and you start making excuses for why you can't test it, and then you say, but I have this over here, and like this embryology over here, we can assume a common ancestor, blah blah blah. Well, there you go, assuming again, and there you go one more time with another untestable hypothesis. And then when you say, oh well, look, the hippopotamus and the whale, look at their DNA, they're similar. Well, you're again talking about a common ancestor. Your hypothesis is they have a common ancestor. And again, you can't test it. So that's what you keep giving me. Just one untestable hypothesis over another. And you're saying that all of these verify one another. And that's just ridiculous. If you have one untestable hypothesis and you can't call that science, then you can have 100 untestable hypotheses piled up on top of one another, and it's still not science. Science, if it's going to be a scientific statement, now, if you want to make that as a statement in faith, and just say, look, this is what I believe. It's all untestable, but it's what I believe. I'd have no problem with that, Mike. But you're not being honest here. That's not what you're saying. You're not admitting that all of this are statements of faith on your part. You're not admitting that at all. You're calling it science, and it's not.
You are demonstrating confirmation bias really well here. In spite of all of the evidence supporting evolution, you insist that you're right, and you'll pull these little one-off things. Just hang on a second, okay? Resistance to change. Confirmation bias can make individuals resistant to changing their opinions, even in the face of strong contrary evidence. And then what happens is, in science, a researcher might unintentionally design experiments or interpret data in a way that supports their hypothesis, overlooking the result. This is the part that makes the confirmation bias, okay? Supporting your hypothesis is what we do. Overlooking results that challenge it is not what we're supposed to do. If you have anything that really challenges the hypothesis that we have common ancestry, then bring it on. Let me know what it is. But if you are absolutely,
I have that, dude. You have no proof of it whatsoever.
Hold on. If you are refusing to listen to what I'm trying to tell you about embryology and how we can test these things and how we can look at the morphology and we can look at extant species and we have DNA evidence, you accept it for the father-son relationship, but you don't accept it for the hippopotamus whale relationship, you're the one with confirmation bias. I'm sorry.
Well, we know that the human race, we can test the human race and we can tell who's related, father, son, daughter, or, mother, daughter, things like that. Of course we can. But
How can
you are asserting that this goes cross family and cross genus and cross order, phylum. You don't know that. That is all. That's presupposition, dude. You don't know any of that.
How can we test it? We have two extant members of the family, right?
Well, you see, that's the problem. You can't test it. You can only look at things and gather more confirmation to try to back it up from your standpoint. But there's no way in the world that you can pull out a test and call it falsification.
Okay.
If you don't have
So
the
if
DNA.
So if we went to court and we pulled your DNA and my DNA, and we compared the DNA, and the court said, "Oh, I'm your daddy," that basically I'm your father, and I could be, I think.
I don't think you could. But go ahead.
I think you're 57, right?
No.
Oh, you're older?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, my daughter
I'm
would
glad we cleared that up then, because some people were wondering if you were his actual father. So thank you for that clarification.
No, I am his father. I don't know if this is a shock for him, I'm sure, to hear about it right here, right now. This is like, yeah, this is that moment. Anyway, you would accept that, but you don't accept taking to extent because we don't have your dad's, DNA. We don't have my dad's.
No, you
DNA.
see, I demand science,
go
dude.
back and
I
look at
demand science. If you want to call something science,
Right. Yeah.
then
Science.
have a test for it.
Compare DNA, embryology.
Okay, you compare the DNA of the whale and the hippopotamus. Your hypothesis becomes that they have a common ancestor, but you have
One
no
data
way in the world to test that.
That's only
None.
one data point.
What's that?
I wouldn't go.
Yeah. And you don't
I
have a way to test any of these data points that you've thrown at me, dude. None.
do. Yeah, you do.
Because you have to test a common ancestor in each and every one of them, and you don't have that.
No, you don't have to test it exactly. You can do.
If you're going to test your hypothesis, you do. If you're going to test any one of those hypotheses with a true test that has the capability of proving it wrong, DNA is the only test available for that.
You're insisting that science always goes by deductive evidence, and no, it doesn't. It goes by inductive.
No, I'm just telling you, it goes by. That's what falsification is. If you don't want to live with that, that's okay. If you want to deny this part of the scientific method, you may do so. I won't nail you to the cross for it. I promise you. But I will tell you what you're teaching isn't science, because what you're teaching is a statement of faith. You've not tested any of this.
You're teaching right now. Okay. We got
this is a good point of contention for you guys, because there's science being brought up today, but there's also a lot of faith.
Yes, exactly.
This discussion. So this is worth perhaps thinking about more, maybe rehashing this. But we're at the 2-hour mark, and I think if you guys want to come back and do more of this, or also do purpose, why don't we just go ahead and do that? Why don't we just kind of close this up for today?
I'm good either way. I'm good either way.
Take a break and try to do a purpose first. Okay, that's good.
You guys can go ahead and comment on this video. Like, one of you can offer a time, and then the other one can accept or offer another time, and I'll check the comments.
I'm leaving town here this weekend, and I have my ex-wife just came down with COVID, and we were shopping together, and I don't know what my future is, so I can't pick a time right now. So everything's up in the air this week.
Okay.
So probably next week would work. We'll work something out next week.
That's fine with
this
me.
This week is a show. Can't say. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. It was a good discussion. I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to hearing from you guys again. We got a pretty good audience. So on that note, I will say good day to you both, and grace and peace to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, JG, for hosting this, brother.
Yeah. Thank both of you. So, okay. I'm out.
God bless.
All right. It's going to do it. Got to get back to some stuff I was doing. Thanks to all you guys participating in the side chat. Pretty focused on the conversation, but from what I saw in the side chat, it was also a good conversation. So hopefully we'll get some more of that next time. And thanks for showing some appreciation and respect for our guests today. So take care. You guys have a great day.